Hey, I'm Kristen.
And I'm Mike.
And this is
The Business Family.
You're listening to episode 10 of The Business Family. On today's episode, we're talking with Charis and Kevin LaForge of LaForge Family Vineyard. These two, who are in the throes of turning a profit, had so many good things to say that we actually talked to them for over 2 hours. So here is part 1 of their episode, where we hear all about how it began in Iraq, the significance wine holds for their family, and how to navigate all that bureaucratic red tape with grace and poise. And you better believe that we all had a glass of wine in our hands the entire time. So let's jump right in. So we are here at the LaForge Family Vineyard. It is in Warrenville, just outside of Chicago. We're here with Charis and Kevin, who are the LaForges, which is so exciting. We're actually drinking their wine. Look at that.
From the vines that are like 4 rows down.
Yes.
One row over.
One row over.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry.
I love it. So this is the wine that we're drinking, the Frontenac. And this is a retired barrel. If you're watching, if you're not, you should go on our YouTube channel. And Kevin said something that if you're drinking what's the phrase?
Oh, so this is something I read in the book that kind of inspired this whole crazy idea, called From Vines to Wines by Jeff Cox. And it's like on page 2. And it's an old adage in the wine industry that wine tastes best when it is consumed in the region in which it was grown. And so basically the closer you are to where the grapes were grown, the better the wine will taste. And I've found that adage to be true.
Here.
We're literally sitting on the ground next to the vines that produced this wine. And there's just something I really like about that.
Kevin's secretly a romantic.
Don't tell anyone. You can't let that get out.
Awesome. So yeah, give us a little bit of a timeline of you guys meeting. Kevin, I heard through the grapevine that you have been doing wine for a long time, which I didn't know. I thought you guys kind of came up with this idea recently. So give us a timeline of family, kids, grapevines, all that kind of stuff.
Well, should I start at the long history here?
You want to start with the Army?
I can go way
us,
back.
And then go back to the Army?
We can start with the Army.
Okay.
So when I was 18, I signed up and joined the United States Army back in 2003. And then I was deployed to Iraq. And while you're in Iraq, when you're not getting shot at or blown up, it is boring, very boring. And so one of my platoon mates comes up to me one day. He's like, "Hey, I think I'm gonna make wine." And I'm like, okay. He's like, "You want to help?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm
in Iraq."
In Iraq, yeah. And I'm like, "Yeah, I'm bored." So you're not allowed to have alcohol when you're deployed because they don't like people running around drunk with automatic weapons. Not that stopped any of us from receiving alcohol in care packages. I didn't drink though. Like people had some, and I didn't drink when I was in the Army. I had my first beer when I was 18, actually. So I guess I did drink once underage, and my sergeant, Sergeant Sheeler, otherwise known as Dirty Rice Sausage.
That is a whole other story. Not to be covered
he ordered
today.
me to drink a beer before we deployed to Iraq.
He ordered it.
Yes, that's what he said. And I'm like, all right. So I think he's out now, so he's not going to get in trouble for this if anybody listens.
We definitely have the government listening to our podcast.
I'm so sorry, Sergeant Sheeler. I didn't drink, but I was just bored, and I'm like, this sounds interesting. And so I learned about the process, and Sergeant Courier, Brian Courier is his name. He's the guy who procured the fruit product. He was we called him the master filter for his ability to acquire things. So he had figured out when the food trucks would arrive if they didn't get attacked and then turn back. He'd be there, and he always volunteered for food duty. And so he'd help unload, and so we'd always get first pick of stuff, and he'd bring us stuff all the time. So he got all these grapes. And a few other fruits with it too. And so we just mashed them up and added sugar, and he had some families send him some yeast from home.
Oh my gosh.
Put the yeast in there, and then we started around, and that was the start of it. We called it Brian Brew, after his first name. But he was injured in a car bomb attack and got sent home. Wow. And so he didn't actually get to finish it. So I finished that batch, and we served it to the whole platoon, and it was a big hit.
Did it taste good?
I thought it tasted pretty good. Everyone really liked the alcohol. We left the sugar content pretty high. I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't let the yeast settle out. And so there was probably a little bit too much sugar in there. And so about a third of the platoon had bad diarrhea the next day.
Ooh.
Because they were also eating like the fermented fruit too. And so that's like, really high in yeast. And so some people didn't, their digestive tracts did not handle that well. So that was my
Kevin's come a long way
You
since
almost
then.
single-handedly took out your own platoon.
Right, yeah, there was so then I did one more batch while I was deployed in Iraq, and then when I got back to the States, I just kept doing it as a hobby.
That's so fun.
And so to include the first apartment I lived in when I went to Illinois State University, you might be familiar with this school. I'm going to adjust that a little bit. The first apartment I lived in was like me and 3 other guys, and we lived in a 2-bedroom apartment with 4 of us. So the rent was really cheap. And but yeah, I just started making wine there. The first batch I made, I capped it before the fermentation finished, and it blew up in the kitchen.
Yep.
And then when I moved in with Barney, Franz, and Christopher Pond, and at the time Barney's twin brother, we started making wine there, and it was the apartment was called the Mailbox, and
M-A-L-E.
M-A-L-E, and so I continued to make wine there, and that was when shortly. I'm trying to think. How did we meet, dear?
We met at...
I have other hobbies.
So one of our other hobbies is rock climbing. And Kevin and I actually met at the climbing gym through Kevin's friend and roommate, Barney. It was my first time at a climbing gym, so I was just getting into it. Kevin and I basically, like, for the next 2 years, we basically like sort of hung out in the same friend group. We didn't really get to know each other super well until I want to say it was like, it was a couple years after we met, or a year and a half or so. And then at one point we just started spending more time together and getting to know each other, and started dating. And we dated for like a year, got engaged, and we're married 9 months later, something like that.
We dated for a year, and then we had a 9-month engagement. Far too long. Engagement should be shorter. And then and I just continued the winemaking hobby.
So that was something we would do. He'd have he'd have people over to taste the wine, and kind of give him opinions on how to.
These are we at the Mailbox
and
we're incredibly cultured. This is something that you missed in coming in a little later. We had not only did we have beer tastings for when Barney would complete a batch of beer, we'd bring people over and do wine tastings as we bottled, because I'd do a back sweetening deal, or I'd do final additives to the wine and then just pass it around the room, and everyone would get to try it, and we'd settle on what we liked the best, and that's what would go in the bottle.
Cool.
And we also had parlor recitals with classical music and all kinds of things that were very fancy cheeses.
I was just the cusp.
Yeah.
I was just too young.
And then we got Alec, Alec and Chris, the opposite of culture.
Well, just to give you an idea of how cultured and classy Kevin is, he helped me move at the end of my sophomore year. He helped me move from my dorm room into my apartment. So he pulls up, and we didn't know each other super well yet at that point. That was kind of when, like, after that point we started hanging out more. But he pulls up in his Jeep, and he's listening to Bach. And so my eyes and my brain were trying to make sense of what I was seeing.
Prove me wrong.
I guess.
That's awesome.
That's so
That
good.
is awesome.
So fast forward to today, you guys have 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
You have this house that you bought in 2016, and tell us a little bit about the house and even making the decision to buy this property, because I'm assuming that grapes had something to do with it. Right.
How did you make that assumption?
So we, after we got married, we moved to Naperville, and that's where we were living when.
You guys were done with school at this point, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So
And you guys were in working careers?
Yeah. So Kevin was working for.
I was working for Liberty Mutual Insurance as a claims adjuster.
Got it.
So this is a
And at the time, I was also working for another insurance company doing auto claims. So we would come home from work and complain about our cases. Or complain about our jobs. No, it was good for a time. It's just a field that you just get burned out really quickly in. So, I mean, it paid the bills, paid off my student loans. So very thankful for that. But I think, there comes a point when it's time to walk away.
I mean, I don't want to knock and be like, oh, adjusting claims is the worst thing ever.
No,
or
it's
anything
not.
like
But
that,
it's just high stress.
Sure.
So
Yeah, it's certainly something that I felt I was pretty good at, and I started handling the big cases. So I was doing like severe injuries and lawsuits. I was spending a lot of time at mediations and
but at the same time we were doing we were just making occasional batches of wine just as a hobby.
And we do stuff for people's weddings. So we have a few friends that get married, and then when Barney and Kate got married, we actually made the wine that was served at their wedding. And that was all like we were still living at the house that we had bought in Naperville.
So it was a tiny starter home, like
900
square feet, which is fine for two people. And then Elias was born, and it was still okay. But we had a few vines in our backyard that Kevin had picked up from the hardware store. We had no idea what we were doing.
I didn't know what I was doing, but I was like, oh, I make wine. I should grow grapes.
Yeah.
And so I just put these Concord vines in the back. Although the labels had said that I bought 2 Niagara and 2 Concord. Turns out they were all Concord because Home Depot doesn't know what their grapes are. But
so we were playing around with those. Nothing really came of it except for trying to learn how to keep vines alive in the Midwest.
I couldn't. The bunnies kept eating them.
Yeah. So anyway, we were kind of keeping the idea of buying our forever home kind of in the back of our minds, and we went on a trip to Arizona, and while we were there, Kevin started reading.
I started reading From Vines to Wines. That was the book I referred earlier
by Jeff Cox.
By Jeff Cox. And I like said, I read that quote that said like wine tastes best in the region in which it has grown. I was just like, that sounds amazing. And then throughout his book, he starts talking about how not good wine can be grown not only in California and the south of France and all the places that you generally think that wine comes from. But that you can also find different grape varieties that will grow in just about any climate.
Even as professional photographers and videographers, we found ourselves using our cell phones to capture a lot of our on-the-go content for both our family and our business. That's why we purchased Moment lenses. Moment makes a variety of lenses and photography gear for your mobile device that can elevate your cell phone camera to a more professional quality. If you're interested in learning how Moment lenses can up your cell phone game, check out thebusinessfam.com/moment and get 10% off any of your purchase.
And I was like, oh, is that so? And so I started looking that up and reading all about it. And that's when I told Charis, I'm like, I think when we move, I'd like to stay close to my parents and stay in DuPage County because I grew up here. I grew up in Warrenville. And even though when I was 18 and I left for the Army, I told my mom, I'm like, I'm going to the other side of the world. I'm never coming back. At least not to Warrenville.
You know everything when you're 18.
Because I knew everything when I was 18, like all good 18-year-olds. And now that I'm older and more mature, I was like, it's actually a really great place to live. And so I was like, okay, so I'd like to find an acre of land and plant a vineyard and, maybe sell some wine and Charis.
So he tells me that and I look at him and I kind of laugh a little bit and I say, good luck with that.
So you can see she's super supportive going
well,
into
it's not
this.
that I didn't like the idea. I just couldn't see how it was feasible. So in our in any given relationship, oftentimes there's the dreamer, the optimist, and the realist. I like to think of myself as a realist. Kevin would say I'm a pessimist. So usually Kevin is like the dreamer, kind of head in the clouds a little bit.
But then also makes crazy things happen.
Sure. Absolutely. Like he's a self-starter and maybe my skepticism like spurred him on and made him more determined. I don't know.
I don't do things to spite you, even though it may seem like it.
No, but I think that I don't know, depending on your personality, that could be something like, oh, you don't think I can do it? Let's see if I can do it.
That's Kristen for sure.
So
she's like, oh, you said I can't do that?
Yeah.
Screw you. I will do that. I can do anything I want.
Yeah, so I then after mentioning this, like about, what was it? I guess it would have only been about 4 months later, this property came up for sale where we're currently sitting. So of course, everyone already, you've cheated, the spoiler, we you know how it ended, but this was up for sale. It was out of a price range when I first saw it, and I was like, okay, no big deal. And then it just wasn't selling, and the price dropped, and so we came, and my brother was actually out looking at a house, and I was like, well, how about we'll go look too. And, while you're out, while you have the realtor with you, how about we just go check this one out? So we came and checked it out, and Charis said she's always wanted an old house with character. And so she fell in love with the house, and I fell in love with the land. And next thing you know,
and it actually,
talking about contract.
Yeah, it worked out,
awesome.
actually. And I was honestly like shocked the whole time, but I think the house, so it's an older house and it needs some work. We're doing some work on it.
1912 is not just older, it's
Wow. It's an
old.
old house, yes. And there's been a lot of interesting work done to it. So basically we were going into it knowing that that we were buying a little bit of a fixer and we'd be putting in our own.
So Mike and Kristen have been through it right now. Yeah. They know what's going on.
I mean, it looked like a little bit of a fixer. It's more than a little bit.
Sure.
As we have discovered. And so the house actually brought down the value of the land, or depreciated the value of the land.
If there was no house on the property would probably sold
we
for
wouldn't
more.
have been able to afford it.
Wow.
So I mean, it
So
seemed
funny.
to me like divine providence. Like,
That's crazy.
Here is the land you are looking for. Like,
I will take you to the land of your peoples.
exactly.
So at that point, once we had the property, I just started doing the research in earnest about what we were going to do.
How many hours of research do you think you put in?
That's hard to say. I probably the first year 80 to 100, and that was in mostly just in different grapevines and varieties and trellising systems. Everything that you see out here right now is a result of some form of research in another. Yeah. Everything from
That's
the spacing.
why there actually are vines here, because if we just bought, we did buy a couple of Riesling. That didn't work out well. But yeah, what Kevin found was we needed cold climate hybrids. So you can.
Yeah. So, but everything you see from the post, the type of post, the angle of the post, the spacing of the vines, the type of wire, the posts that they're staked to, what they're tied off to the posts with, everything that they've been treated with, the way that they've been pruned, everything was all new to me, because I had only been a winemaker up to that point, and I'd never done viticulture.
Yeah.
And so I didn't know. And so that was all research that went into it. Now, the book that we had read, the From Vines to Wines, that was the edition that I was reading, had been published in 1999. And so it didn't really mention Illinois, Northern Illinois specifically, as a grape growing region. And so that was kind of something where I was setting off on my own. Now, I had discovered Vidal Blanc and Ceval Blanc through Linford Winery in Chicago, because they actually buy some Ceval and
Realize
Vidal.
we should also mention we also had another baby in
yeah,
this time.
That's true.
After we bought the house. So our kids are now, we have a son who is 4 and a daughter who's 2.
Cool.
So just to give you a picture of
and
our
working
family
full-time
too.
jobs, not at insurance
Well,
companies?
so once I had Elias, once I had my first,
She got a promotion.
Yes, I got a promotion to stay-at-home momhood.
Love it.
It's a good job. Everyone should try it.
And so, so then when we kind of started on our plan for the vineyard and winery, the plan was, this was going to be our side hustle. And so that's what it is. And so Kevin still works a day job. He works for a company
I work for a software company called Instech. So I left claims and now I'm a business analyst for the software company.
Cool.
So it's very, very boring for most people when I talk about it. But usually when I talk to people, they're like, what do you do? Well, I'm a business analyst. I climb rocks and I make wine. And usually people are like, you climb rocks or you make wine? No one's like, oh, you're a business analyst? So it's, at the very least, it's a conversation piece.
So yeah, it's a thing that we do that's really fun. The work that we do that's fun to talk about. So, and it's very family oriented. The kids, like hanging out in the vineyard with us, and they help. In quotes. Although sometimes, like Elias, he's getting to the age where he can actually be.
He's actually useful now, and one of the things about having a small business and in a family and having it literally, the winery is a 100 square foot room that's in our house.
We call it our tiny winey.
Our tiny winey.
And so, what do you mean by the winery? Is like you are a legitimate business,
right?
That has a wine license.
We're licensed from the,
and so that means you have to meet certain requirements.
We got our business license and liquor license about a year ago and opened up then. So basically, this just the timeline is we moved here about 3.5 years ago. Started planting right away, just a few rows at a time every year. And while we were
4 rows first year, 6 rows next year, 5 the year after that. And each row has about 15 vines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So basically, while we were trying to establishing our vines and everything, we were also getting started on all the red tape in the licensing process.
Forget that though. I want to finish the thought I had with about kids and stuff. That there's a lot of thought like, okay, well, with when I was a little kid, Daddy went to work, and for all I knew, he pulled money off the money tree and came home, and then we got to go shopping and buy things. And there really wasn't a connection between work, hard work and money, which is real life. That's it. You work hard, and you get money.
You see it now because we see how hard he works now. But as a kid, I think it's harder to
it's hard to make that process. But so we'll have this opportunity because the winery is literally in the house that Elias and Callie, our daughter, they're going to be able to see that, okay, to make money, what we do is in the spring, we go out and we work and or late winter, we're pruning and getting everything ready. In the spring, we're managing things. We're protecting the vines, and then we're protecting the fruit into the summer, and we're watching it as it ripens. And then we're doing more work out there. We're mowing and pulling weeds. Yeah. And then at the fall, and we still haven't gotten money yet. We're still working, but we haven't gotten money yet. And then in the fall, we're harvesting and crushing, and we're bringing the grapes in, and then we're doing the fermenting and managing it in there. And then at the end of all that work, nearly a year later, we're going to take this bottle and then we're going to give it to somebody, and then they're going to give us money. And to see like, okay, so there's a very visual component for the kids that they get to see. Hard work equals money. It's not just me telling them that and going away and doing that somewhere and coming back. They actually have the opportunity to grow up where that's something that's happening in the house. And I think that's something that when I was thinking of this idea that came to my head, that it came to my mind, that I wanted my kids to be able to see that and live that experience where hard work equals money and not just money grows on the magic money tree that Daddy goes and picks from.
Yeah, that's so cool.
Yeah. And so then as far as like the logistical side, with me being a stay-at-home mom and Kevin working full-time, the other piece to figure out was how do we make this, thank you. How do we make this business work when we can't have kind of the standard model? Like if you go to a winery, usually they have a tasting room and you can go in at any of, and they have set hours and everything. We couldn't do that. And so what we ended up doing is, so on our website, it says that we're available Monday through Saturday by appointment. Okay. And that gives me the flexibility to schedule things kind of around my schedule with the kids.
Yeah.
So basically, people can go online, place their order, and arrange a time to come by and pick it up. We can't do tastings since we don't have the licensing for that. And I was a little bit nervous that would deter people. But I think in the town that we live in, it actually works out really well because it's almost like a small town feel and a very tight-knit community. And I think people were just really excited to have a local winery.
Cool.
So that's basically how we operate. And it's a little challenging to kind of...
And if I can break in it, it's not just the licensing aspect as to why we can't do tastings. And a lot of it has to do with the limited production and limited overall what would be foot traffic.
Yeah.
And then also, just for the neighbor's sake, imagine like we're in a zone residential area. We had to get a special use permit from the city. We had to file and go through that entire process to get that. But imagine if you're like trying to tell your neighbors while you're getting this permit, like, hey, we're going to open a bar like, in our backyard. I don't, like to get that past city council.
We'd
have
move it out of the home. Yeah,
but like
absolutely.
with the limited production and if with limited people coming by, if one person comes by and we open 4 bottles of wine to do a tasting, and then they're like, oh, that's great. And they pay us $5 for the tasting. And then they buy 2 bottles of wine. Let's just say, $15 each. So that's great. We made $35. We just gave away 7 bottles of wine for $35. That's $5 each.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
That's really tough to turn a profit on. And so that was the other, and then we're going to have to dump them out. It's not like they're going to keep more than a day or two if it's a dry red. I mean, with the sweet or whites and that kind of thing, you can keep them for up to a week, but
they go bad.
They go bad. So so even just from a business standpoint, being as small as we are with the production, as small as we have, it just didn't really make much logistical sense for us to go into a tasting room model, especially at this point where we're at in the business.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. I mean, the red tape, obviously, it's a big deal because especially for small business, there's so much to go through. And especially for something like the food and wine industry, it's just crazy. And so can you talk to me, were you guys literally like reading city ordinances and manuals or did you have somebody who was like, hey, I've done this before?
This was, so now I talked about research. The first 2 years of doing this was all research on grapes and spacing and different things I need to do to make good wine out of the grapes. And then the third year was we were getting ready to get open was probably about 100 to 120 hours of research on red tape only. It was exceptionally frustrating because you're thinking like, I just want to do what I've been doing for almost 15 years now. I've just been making wine, giving it to people. That's what I've been doing. Like why suddenly, if I want to get money from these people, do I have to go through these steps? Like, nobody's ever gotten sick other than, the people get diarrhea from that first batch in Iraq, but we're not going to talk about that. So it's like, what's the, what's the deal with it? So there was that aspect of it was like, I can't believe I have to do this. But I was determined with it. And it helped that I had a little bit of, I always caveat when I'm on a podcast, I am not a lawyer. I cannot give you legal advice. But lay people can read the law and interpret the law. It's not something that you absolutely need to pay somebody $300 an hour to do for you. And if you have troubles with it, you can always call or just have another friend or somebody look at it and be like, does this mean what I think it means? And most laws are plain English. You just have to know how to find your way around it. And I'd kind of learned that.
And put the work in.
And put the work in. But I'd kind of learned how to do some of that when I was handling claims. A lot of liability claims are handled through the tort system. And so I was quite familiar with tort law and how that works, and other law follows a similar pattern as far as, okay, you're going to read this and then you're going to be a bunch of words and terms in there that are defined, and you got to go to the definition section, read and determine and make sure that you fit in that definition, and that regulation applies to you if you fit in that definition. And that was the kind of the thought process behind it. But I researched and I determined that we would need, for the winery, we would need to be registered and permitted through the TTB, which is the Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau, and that we'd also need to be registered with the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, and then we would need to be cleared and have a license through the ILCC, which is the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. That was a potential that we need to be checked out by the DuPage County Health Department. And then lastly, we would need to have the city of Warrenville approval. So I was basically looking at, when I first started this research, I was looking at potentially having to deal with 5 layers of bureaucracy.
Wow.
And that's because alcohol is a fairly highly regulated industry, anything alcohol related. Now, food is pretty highly regulated. There's a lot of other things that are regulated. It was something that I just kind of handled one step at a time. And I just started doing a lot of research on that. And one of the things I found was there's this forum, winemakingtalk.com, where there's these guys that told their stories from going from hobby to commercial. And they just wrote their stories out there. And I just got in touch with them, and they're in different states. There's nobody who's done that in this area that I was able to get in touch with other than, I believe his name is Mike down at Fox Valley Winery, who I talked with him for a little bit. And I just started to kind of figure it out and realized the order that I needed to go in. So I had to go TTB first, and then once the TTB was taken care of, I needed to start working with the city and then the ILCC at the same time. And then because we have home rule in Warrenville, the city supersedes the county, and so I wouldn't need a county health inspection unless the city required me to get one. And fortunately, the city didn't require me to get one. Because I was already inspected I already had to get an inspection from the Illinois Liquor Control Commission. And that was each and every single one of those along the way. The frustrating aspect of getting in touch with was getting in touch with somebody who could actually help you. And I found that once you had filed your application and gotten your paperwork to them, even if it wasn't in order, once you did that, then they kind of knew you were serious and you weren't just kind of throwing things out there.
Interesting.
And then once you got in touch with someone, they're super helpful. Like everybody, the TTB that I talked to was incredibly helpful. It was just getting to that point was really frustrating. But then once I had my case number and I was rolling down the line, I'd be like, okay, what do I need? And the guy's like, okay, I need this from you and this from you. And then you're good to go. And I'm like, okay, this isn't a joke. Like if I just get you these two things, then I'm good to go. And he's like, yes. And I did it. And then 24 hours later, it was turned around.
Wow.
And I had the permit. But it was to get to that
those
point.
Felt like real breakthroughh.
Well, there's like a big breakthrough. Like I was like, we have a permit. But like to get to that point was 3 months of research and 3 months of submitting things and trying to get things in. The ILCC the Illinois Liquor Control Commission was by far the most frustrating because Illinois is a basket case, governmentally speaking. And even though they have a website online, mytax.il, .gov, you can't submit new applications on there. You can only submit renewal applications. New applications have to be submitted by paper. And so I had to mail a paper packet of all my stuff to Springfield to have them mail it back to me and say, you forgot this one thing on page 1, line 1. No. And then I was like, oh, okay. So I fixed that. And then I sent it back to them.
Right. And you think they would go through it all and say, oh, you're missing this list of, like, here's a list of the things that you missed.
Yeah. And then they just sent it back to me again. It's like, here's this thing on page 2 you missed. And I was like,
gosh.
Are you kidding me? I'm spending $5 on postage each time to send you this stupid packet. And you can't just go through the whole thing. And so then at that point, I picked up the phone and like called and they're like, you need to talk to this person. Oh, she's on vacation. She's not going to be back for, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I call again, leave a message for her, and call again. Like, and at this point I was like, this is just discipline. I called every day for a week, and then until she called me back and was like, hey, I got your thing, and I was like, okay, what do I need? I'm tired of playing mail telephone here. To the tune of $5 a pop. And so she told me, like, this is what I'm going to look for. I'm like, great, I'm going to send you those things. And so I sent it, and then she went through it, got on the phone with her, and that was it. Once I got in touch with someone, super helpful, got what I needed and got it done. But it was getting to that point that was incredibly frustrating. And then the last process was with the city, and the city, the thing that I did before I even started this is I went through and I did my research on the city. Since I grew up here, I kind of have a feel for kind of what the people in town are looking for, but I really didn't know what it was like to deal with local government. Now, Warrenville is different than, like, if you try to go through Cook County, anything in Cook County, if you're familiar with Cook County, I'm sure. I've just from the stories I've heard, you have to line the pockets of people, and it can get really messy.
Wow.
In the city. Now, Warrenville doesn't have that. We're a relatively small town, and so I was able to go to the city hall and immediately meet with the gal who does the zoning and talk to her about what would be expected and what would need to happen. And she was really helpful, and we were able to get that process started. It was an expensive process though, because essentially it's like, okay, you're applying to essentially make some changes in the law, so you need to pay for everything that goes into that. And so that was something that actually was a little taxing on our...
Wasp on your shoulder again.
This guy really likes me. It's possible that he's on his way out because he may have consumed something that is harmful to him. Anyway, we have wasps that are trying to eat our grapes. So with the city, like they were... The process was long, and I know you helped with because you got the sign together that we had to do.
Yeah, I had
we
to send out a bunch of certified mail to all of our neighbors. That was expensive.
Yeah, and then we had to put out a sign and basically do a public hearing where neighbors, people in town could come out and be like,
detest.
You're trying to open a bar?
Right.
Which is the...
Nobody did that. Everyone was great.
Yeah, everyone was great. And we worked out everything with our neighbors too. Because again, being zoned residential, we basically had to be like, look, it's still going to be a residential area. This isn't,
look,
you know...
And we're
guys
not
get a
trying to
case a
change our
year.
neighborhood or anything.
Well, that's the other thing is most neighbors were like, yes, please. Because we're like, you can taste the wine, whenever you want. And that was most people were just really, really excited about having a winery. Speaking of tasting the wine. So we're drinking our Frontenac right now, which is we'll go into more on the grapes later, but so that was an interesting deal. What that was for us, that was a bit of a surprise, is I had kind of budgeted about $2,000 for red tape expenses.
Okay.
It ended up costing about $4,800.
So the moral of the story is...
We did not hire a lawyer. We did not hire an accountant or a tax professional or any kind of consulting firm to help us with this. So just on our own, paying the bare minimum of expenses, it was about $4,800.
Yeah. So it's going to cost 2 to 3 times as much as you think it's going to.
Yeah.
As you hope.
As you hope, yeah.
And
As you hope.
And I
As
gotta
you
say
budget
this,
for.
the thing is, at the end of the day, after going through all of these layers of regulations and really discovering what they are and what they do for the public, not a single one of them makes the product safer. Not a one. It's so like after going through it, I'm like, I'm now an anarchist. Like none of this needs to exist.
Oh my gosh.
With the exception of like the city part, I think was important, but like everything from above the city level, it didn't need to happen.
Sure.
Like it's all just so like great. Now we're gonna.
Yes.
I'm gonna. Is it okay if I kill something live on podcast?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, he needed to go.
I kill wasps with my bare hands. That's how hardcore I am.
I hate wasps.
When it comes to the
so
grapevines.
And hopefully his friends won't come. Otherwise, I'll probably get stung in the hand.
Probably. So this is super helpful.
Yeah.
I want to talk a little bit about money. Is that okay?
Yeah,
So
yeah. Sure.
I would love to hear. So you're telling me, budgeted $2,000, ended up costing $4,800. I mean, what was your expectation? Were you like wanting to profit off of this eventually? Were you like, nah, this is like a side hustle? I heard you say, if we break even, woohoo, I'd rather just like bless people with this wine. Or are you like, no, we have a plan to make money?
So our plan right now is this is a side hustle, but we are working towards making a profit. Basically, it's a little extra income.
So
we would love for it to continue growing and everything, but at this point, it's I like the security of Kevin's job.
Yeah.
He likes his job, and it's working right now for him to do his day job and for us to do this. And so if this is all it ends up being, I'm happy and fulfilled with it.
You hot?
Oh yeah, man.
We have a chilled
You guys
wine
are
we
kind
can
of in
bring
the
out.
sun, aren't
Yeah.
you?
Just in a sec.
Yeah. Maybe we need that chilled wine
some
to drink
some
to
lemonade
keep us
wine.
Want me
cool.
to grab it?
Should we pause? Can we pause?
We can pause. Although while we're on the subject, I'll talk about a little bit about the money. So we've cash flowed everything. So one of the things when we got into this is
Can you explain what that means?
So
Just
that
for
means-
people who don't know.
no debt, And also, we did not get an equity stake from anybody either. So we are 100% owners. We didn't sell off shares of stock or have any investors in that kind of standpoint. So when we got into this, Charis was, again, because she was skeptical of this, she's like, we do not borrow money so that this can happen.
Well, this is something that we committed to after we paid off my student loans. That's the only debt I've ever been in outside of a mortgage. And as soon as we got them paid off, we said, okay, we're living debt free from now on, with the exception of our mortgage. And in any, and this was no exception. So with this, we said, okay, if we can cash flow it, if we can save up the money, and if we can still meet our budget and our financial goals, yes, let's do it. So
we started when I left left Liberty Mutual. They cashed out a pension that I had at the time, and it was basically about $10,000 from the time that I'd been there. And I said, okay, this money, this $10,000, I paid the tax penalty, which I know technically they're like, oh, you should have moved it around, and I was like, whatever. I just paid the tax penalty, and I said, okay, now this money is the business budget. This is it. Once we run out of money, that's it. Like, we need to make more money. And so the first 2 rows I put in, I made so many mistakes when I was planting, but like we spent, essentially it was about $2,000 a year, and then it ended up being more for certain things. And then we also had to pay, I mentioned to you guys, we had to pay for some improvements to the land as far as bringing down some trees that needed to be brought down. We would be planting more grapes now, but we ran out of cash. But basically we do have a small loan, we call it, in that we ended up having to bail the business out to finish the licensing process.
But it was our own money. So we loaned ourselves the money.
Right
basically
now we
only owe ourselves, which
now the business owes us $2,000.
So are you technically, like, you're not a sole proprietorship?
We are a partnership.
A partnership. Okay.
So technically it has the exact same liability as a sole proprietor. Got it. Part of the overhead component for this business is we do have a GL policy, a general liability policy, and a liquor policy. Okay. Liability policy to the tune of, I guess I don't want to say my limits on a public podcast in case somebody does decide to sue me.
Yeah, that's fine.
We have a lot of insurance because we have infinite exposure at this point because of the way we're set up. We're not set up as an S Corp or an LLC.
Sure. Totally.
And in part that was because of our really low capital startup, our overall relatively low risk model of doing business. There's very little that can happen, even from a DRAM liability standpoint, where we're looking at a massive lawsuit.
Right.
And I've settled a lot of massive lawsuits, so I'm kind of familiar with what the liability landscape would look like. So it would be a particularly a huge injury with a particularly vindictive plaintiff that would try to take more than the limits of our insurance and essentially take our house from us. But that is something that's in the back of my head. It is entirely possible that someone could conceivably sue us for some reason, sue the business for some reason, and then we would be held personally liable.
Sure.
But that's something that we have built into our risk model, and it's an acceptable level of risk that we have. So these are all things that in the research that I was doing that I was thinking like, okay, what level of risk are we willing to accept? And so that's, as far as personal risk, that's part of the reasons why we have the massive liability policy, and as well as the no loan aspect of it, is that no one's going to foreclose on the business and then put our personal assets at risk. I mean, the only risk that we have is, I lose my day job and we don't make enough money selling wine, and then that's just life risk. There's no difference between that and what the business brings on. So.
Totally. So have you actually, you had this $10,000. It's gone, it sounds like, right?
It is gone. It is spent on planting these grapes and
so
and
you're still working on flipping that, right? So you're still working on bringing.
Yes. So we are now, this is going to be our first year seeing a profit. Now, granted, it's not a lot, but it's but we're
we are in the black this year.
In the black.
Something is better than nothing.
We are so thrilled to be in the black right now.
Gosh.
I have no idea. I mean, it's hard to describe, but we get paid like what, $1 an hour. But I mean, that's small business life, especially when you're getting started. You're not, you're especially if
I try not to think about that when I put in like so a couple weeks ago we released our black raspberry wine, and it sold out in a week. And so that whole week I was arranging, pickups. We had new orders coming in, doing work on the website. I do all the design and marketing, so I was doing all of that too on top of everything. I think. And we had no childcare that week. Usually my mother-in-law watches the kids 1 day a week so I can work. We didn't have that. And so I think I ended up working like 40 or so hours with no childcare, which was insane. It's not sustainable. I don't recommend it. But experiences like that are also helpful. This is probably not related to what we were just talking about. But
No, go for it.
But I think this has been helpful for me to kind of gauge, okay, what are my needs with this, and what do I need to adjust next time? Because we've had busy releases before, but this was the one where I was like, this is just a
crazy.
lot.
Like,
So how many bottles were you selling?
So we had a little over 140 bottles. So case wise, it's like we had a gross of cases, 12 cases.
Yeah.
And I expected it to move quick last year. It sold out in about 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And so
These are all from the black raspberries.
These are from the black raspberries we have on the property.
That's so cool.
Yeah, and then the other product that we have out is lemonade wine. And so both of those also went on sale at our local grocery store. They're sold out of the black raspberry too. So it was it was kind of nuts. And so I decided, okay, next time we have a big release, I'm getting more childcare.
It's just lesson learned there.
But now
that's so helpful to know.
But now that we're in the black, it's something that like I can look into doing. And so, so it's been a real learning experience, like figuring out how to gauge what my needs are to be able to do my job effectively. And I know you guys have experience with this too, with when your kids are running around, it's really hard to get anything done.
We've got our nanny here watching our children because we were like, we could do this podcast with
and our son's in school and our daughter is playing. Yeah, I mean, it's because otherwise we'd have
Jed would be watching a movie. Otherwise,
that's
exactly.
it.
Yeah, and somebody would be
just
crying,
grabbing cords. I mean, it would be fine, but totally.
Your glass seems empty, Mike.
And it is.
Oh my goodness! Let me remedy this problem.
Hey, if you liked this or any of our other episodes, jump on your phone or your computer right now and let somebody know. We'd love if you tag us on social media and leave us a review on iTunes. So thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.